Hey everybody, it's Pat and me here with another episode of Real Talk, and we're here to talk about a new movie that's, 11 years in the making? Yeah. Avengers Endgame. And it was worth the wait. It is the real deal. So let's get into talking about it. Spoiler alert, everybody. It's a long freaking movie, so we'll try and make this relatively quick, but we got a lot to talk about. Yes. So, first of all, after Thanos' snap after the last movie, they've cut down our characters a lot so that the story could only focus on a few instead of having to struggle with juggling everybody in the Marvel Universe. And I think there were benefits to that.
Yeah, it made everything a little bit simpler.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the difficult parts about Infinity War was it's just juggling so much.
Yeah.
And they kind of pulled it off by splitting them into kind of larger groups.
And by kind of making Thanos the main character. That's sort of how they wrote that one. So everything was told from his perspective, and all the Avengers were almost like side characters in the story instead of drawing main focus.
Yeah, somebody told me that they wrote that movie with the intention of Thanos being the main character and the Avengers essentially being the bad guys.
Yeah. That's what I had heard. So that was really interesting, and that was a move that I don't think was ever really done before.
Yes.
So anyway, I guess this is the beginning and end for a lot of these characters that we like. And so I guess we should start by talking about the Hulk. So at the beginning of this movie, we're really blindsided by Professor Hulk now, who's around, and I guess Bruce Banner and the Hulk somehow figured out a way to get along after the last couple movies, and have somehow combined themselves into one intelligent, very strong, beast of a man.
Yeah, he's, like you said, they found a way to work together, and now he's this weird, super person, essentially.
Yeah.
Hyper intelligent, and I guess that's what they were leading up to, with him getting more and more kind of in control and a little more sentient as the films have gone on. It started with him just being able to calm himself down, and then it evolved into him talking a little bit in Thor Ragnarok, and now he's reached the kind of culmination of the relationship where they're both just in agreement. This is the best arrangement for both of us. Let's do this. And so...
Yeah, and I thought it's a really interesting idea, and apparently it isn't a thing in the comic books that I wasn't really aware of prior. I just think I would have liked to see a little bit more of that setup. I mean, I get that it's the whole 5-year jump and we're just supposed to see these characters where they are, but I would have liked a little bit more than just a little bit of dialogue to tie up how this exactly happened. Because it was just so darn interesting, and I think that's why some people really didn't like it, is it was very jarring and unexpected, and a lot of people I don't think felt like they got its fair due of an explanation.
Yeah, I could see that. It wasn't really explained at all. He just kind of threw out I did this stuff for 18 months.
Yeah, it's thrown as a joke.
It out and
Ant-Man kind of helps because Ant-Man's
right?
the one who's like, whoa, what's going on? And then he feels the need to explain himself.
Yeah, exactly. And that could be a whole movie, probably. You know, the journey of him doing that. But unfortunately, I think Sony still has the rights to the solo films for the Hulk, or Universal does.
Oh, okay.
Universal still has the rights to the solo films of certain characters, and so Marvel can't make them without having to split.
Yeah, and so what they cleverly did was kind of sprinkle in a Hulk storyline amongst other movies. Like you said, it kind of started with Thor Ragnarok, and then proceeded into Infinity War, and then finally wrapped up in Endgame.
Yep. Yeah, it's a nice way to sneak a character arc in there.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of the characters we're going to talk about tonight that were in this movie actually have really definitive wrap-ups and ends to their story, where I felt like Hulk really didn't this time. I'm really curious, because if they come back to him, well, he's got a screwed-up arm from snapping the gauntlet. He lost Natasha Romanoff, so it seems like, besides the comfort of saving the universe, he's in a little bit of a worse spot when the movie ends than when it actually began and they were recovering from the snap. No Natasha Romanoff and a screwed up arm. I mean, I'm sure he's happy that he did the right thing, but he didn't seem to come out in a great place at the end of this story.
But there didn't seem to be that much of an indication that he and Natasha had been hanging out that whole time anyway, So
yeah,
the loss of her
they seem to drop
really
that a little bit more.
A change in his life, if you really think, if they hadn't been hanging out anyway.
Yeah, because they didn't have any close romantic moments with them in this movie. They had a couple moments where they talked and joked and were playful with one another, but not any real romantic tension-y kind of stuff. For all we know, after he became Professor Hulk, maybe they stopped being romantic with each other. We don't really know.
Yeah, I hope that we just continue to see the character in the Marvel movies, even if he's just kind of a side character. But like,
Yeah.
I'm really waiting for eventually. I hope they eventually pull out that moment where it's like, do or die, and they both just go, oh, it's better to let the Hulk take over, and then you just see the crazy Hulk again. And
Yeah, you'd said that to me, so that'd be good if that's a direction that they went with it. I mean, the Hulk is still a very unpredictable character that can go a lot of different ways. What is that? The General's name, is it Bob Ross? I know Ross is something in the General's name that's always after the Hulk. He turns into the Red Hulk in the comics, so there's still the potential of that. There's a potential Abomination that was going to be in Age of Ultron until they realized they were overstuffing that movie too much.
They ended up Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, so they ended up pulling that because they already were juggling so freaking much in that movie.
Yeah.
But let's move on to Black Widow. Black Widow's journey in this movie was really interesting. At the beginning, she's trying to recover, just as a lot of these heroes are, by still running the Avengers and, still trying to save the world as best as she can. Because she said that that's when she was at her best, and that's when she had the most she'd ever had in her life. So she's not going to walk away from this, and she's going to keep on trying to, save the world. She's essentially Nick Fury, but instead of even running something like S.H.I.E.L.D., she's running what's left of the Avengers, essentially.
Yeah, and she's kind of keeping an eye on things and keeping everybody in touch so they know what's going on everywhere else.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, for people that want to be able to come together as a team when they need to, that's crucial to know what everybody's doing. So she's the last strings holding everybody together. So she obviously hasn't let go of anything. Like, her whole goal is just figure out.
Yeah, and so her sacrifice makes sense at the end, and I preferred over Barton because he had more to lose with his family and stuff, where she was basically, well, I guess in a way they were both trying to sacrifice themselves for their family, but you know what I mean, like he had his wife and his kids and all that stuff going on. Yeah. And it'll make Natasha Romanoff way more remembered in the future when people talk about these movies years from now.
Mm-hmm. We already saw one father die in the movie, so you don't need to make it two.
And so it's a terrible shame that she didn't get her due, enough of her due in these movies leading up to this, but I felt like this was a nice, like, hey, look at how important this character is. Kind of like a way to say, like, she's not just someone in the background like she's been shoved into in some of these movies. Yeah, certainly starting out.
It kind of happened in Infinity War. She didn't really have a big part. She just kind of had a couple, like, snappy lines where she was fighting people. Yeah. And then she played a big role in Endgame, so I was glad to see her come back to the front of the attention.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that was one of the nice things, like we said, about the limited characters. It was almost like we focused on the core Avengers from the beginning, and then with a couple of new additions like Ant-Man and stuff like that. But for the most part, it was the core group from the very start of this whole thing. Yeah. So moving on to Iron Man. At the beginning of this, he is traumatized and he is utterly defeated and just ground zero, for him. He's just completely done. He walks away. He's still really bitter at Captain America over the events of Civil War and feeling like Captain America didn't do his best or maybe wasn't present enough. I don't know. He tells Captain America that he wasn't there for the fight, but he really was. So I don't know if that was just stress talking from Tony or what that exactly was.
What I hadn't thought about until I just was thinking about it right before the videos, I think what Tony meant in that moment of you weren't there when we needed you is him saying, look, I predict... It's the same the same thought stream as him talking about Age of Ultron, essentially. He's saying, look, I knew this was going to happen. I knew that we needed a massive protection around the world. And instead of going with me on trying to protect the world, you went this completely different direction. And we needed to work together in that moment, and you weren't there to work together in that moment.
Yeah, no, I can see that. That makes sense. I never really thought about it like that before. Yeah. And so, by the end of this, he does what Iron Man has always been doing. Pepper Potts even says it, that stopping you from doing what this has been the biggest failure of my life. Yeah. So he eventually, sacks up and says, all right, well, I'm still going to try and save the world if I can.
Yeah, they pull the whole, you wouldn't be able to rest if you knew you could do something and you didn't do it. And then in the end, when he dies, the last thing she says to him is, we're going to be okay, as in Pepper and Morgan are going to be okay. You can finally rest because everything's fine right now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and I am a little conflicted about his death because, again, Barton got to live and be with his kids. You see a nice thing, Ant-Man with his kid and Hope at the end. So, to me, it was like, I'm conflicted on the Iron Man death because I think it was a great way to end his character arc. It was a great thing because he started the whole series. That whole last-minute idea of putting in the I am Iron Man line, because that was figured out right towards the end and like refilmed. That was the very last thing they filmed because that was just an unexpected choice that they ended up making. I think the editor suggested it. Unfortunately, I don't have his name right down here, but the editor who had done like a few Marvel movies at this point, he suggested that they do something like that. And I think you had told me that Robert Downey Jr. was apprehensive initially.
Yeah, apparently he just didn't want to do it because it involved him. It's scheduling. He had to grow the beard back out. He had to get back in shape. I saw it in an interview with the directors, and it's just a pain to do a reshoot in January when the movie's coming out in April.
Yeah, so I'm conflicted because I think it brings his thing totally full story. But again, it's a shame to know that his daughter's going to have to grow up without him.
Yeah.
There was a scene that they were going to do, but it just didn't go over well with test audiences, where he was going to see his daughter grown up in the same way that Thanos saw the little girl Gamora, and he would be able to at least talk to his daughter before he passed and stuff like that. But they ended up deciding that it didn't really work with test audiences, so they scrapped it. That would have maybe I wouldn't have agreed with it either. Maybe it would have been jarring for me to watch, but it would have made me feel better in that moment of like, oh, he's leaving this girl alone by herself. Like, it made me feel a little bit better about that part instead of so shitty about it. Especially when Tony got his dad when he was still like older, and his relationship with his dad wasn't even great.
Yeah, it would be a little bit of closure for the relationship at the very least,
Yeah.
without having, as opposed to just having him die when she's very, very young.
Yeah.
It is kind of jarring, but I do agree that it does complete the story arc, and he left in a similar fashion to what his father did for him, in where he left the blueprints to the machine, and he left all these
plans
videos
for the future.
and plans. Yeah, exactly. Tony kind of left the same sort of legacy. You have to imagine that he recorded that message for her at the end, which is like the gut-wrenching moment of the movie, and he left behind this legacy of a hero and all this technology and all these, he has plans, and he has some sort of contingency program or something to teach his daughter stuff. And
yeah, and even Spider-Man stuff, just by, I think, like, one or two shots I saw in the new Spider-Man trailer, I think, like, Iron Man may have left some, like, secret hidden after I'm dead messages for him and stuff like that, which might be really interesting if that's something that we see in Far From Home. I'm not sure. But I think that's something we might experience.
And they kind of mention it a couple times in the trailer and imply that Spider-Man might become the next Iron Man. So.
Yeah. And then the other thing I really liked about Iron Man that a lot of these characters got to get closure, which was really interesting, was with the whole time travel thing. So Tony got to see his father. And there's a line I even remember in, what was it, I think Iron Man 2, where he says, you're talking about a man who said he never even liked me. He never told me he loved me. He never even told me he liked me. His happiest moment was sending me off to boarding school, and what do you call it? Nick Fury says, you don't know him like you think you do, or something like that. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but it was something to that effect.
Yeah.
And so it was really nice to hear him like have this moment with his father and stuff like that, and like his father to actually say something like, "Well, this kid's not even here yet, but there's nothing I wouldn't do for him."
Yeah, it's a nice. It's the one like storyline for Tony Stark that was never resolved for him. He was able to resolve his relationship with Pepper, his relationship with Cap, his relationship with the world and himself by becoming the hero and saving everyone like he hoped he could do by putting up the shield, but there's no easy way for him to resolve the relationship with his dad, and so they sent him back to that time, and he gets to have that conversation and realize that his dad loved him way more than he thought. So it's the only resolution.
Yeah, to finally have that closure.
Yeah, it's the only resolution his character really needed. So it's a nice way to wrap it up, put a bow on it for him right before he dies, to get that validation that he always needed, and close the arc in a nice, happy way, in a way.
Yeah. So that was really good. And then Captain America, his beginning in this I thought was really interesting, because he clearly got inspiration from Falcon in Winter Soldier. Remember when Falcon's kind of a retired vet because of something traumatic that happened to him in the battlefield. I believe he lost like a co-pilot or a partner or something. Mm-hmm. And remember that he was sitting down with groups and talking about the experience and stuff like that. So I think that's what Captain America got that idea from. And it's funny because he's always like giving like inspiring speeches is just something that he can automatically do with like very little to no effort. So it's a good place for him. I really like when he's trying to cheer Natasha Romanoff up a little bit. And he actually mentions that he's actually seeing whales in the Hudson and stuff like that because there's less pollution. She's like, really? You're going to tell me to like that there's something good out of this situation?
Yeah, and the first thing he does is come in and make a cheesy joke about how he's a terrible cook and all that. So he's dad.
Yeah, exactly. There's a moment like that's pretty obvious in Civil War when he talks to Wanda. He's definitely playing that dad role. It comes in with like a dad sweater and shit. I remember that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to talk about, I think, with him. So you got him doing that. But yeah, he says he's incapable of moving on the same way Natasha is. He's still desperate to find a way to solve this at like any cost. Once Scott Lang shows up and he sees that there's a possibility to do something, he's totally on top of it. Like he's been waiting for this opportunity. And then there's so many great moments with him. Pat knows that one of my favorite moments is when he gets to use Mjolnir in the movie. Yeah. And Thor's even like, I knew it! And, you know, you get to see him even shoot the lightning from it and stuff like that. Because when Vision used the hammer, I didn't get to see that. It was pretty cool when Vision picked up the hammer. Yeah. But he only ever used it just like as a normal hammer. So it was cool to just see Captain America actually holding it and lightning shooting from it and all kinds of crazy shit.
Yeah, I heard that one of the Russo brothers said that he actually could have done it in Avengers 2, Age of Ultron, and then chose not to because he didn't want to hurt Thor's feelings or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard two theories.
You see it wiggle very slightly, and so the question is, was he almost worthy, or did he realize he was and then just go, oh, never mind?
I think the two huge theories out there is the first one, like you said, he didn't want to humiliate Thor, and then the second one that because he knew Bucky had killed Tony's parents and not told Tony, that it may have made him unworthy. So those were like the two theories out there. You know, pick whichever one you want. A lot of people, but you know, I think there is evidence to support yours because Thor even says, "I knew it." Yeah. But that still is kind of broad.
And
but it does lean in that direction. Oh, really?
Yeah, I was just taking it from an interview with the directors.
Fair enough. Well, there you go.
Who knows if it's actually true?
Well. And then, of course, he gets his pleasant ending because this is his like wrap up. He gets to go back and see Agent Carter and live out his life with her. Yeah. And they play some music. It's even the last shot of the movie. It's really beautiful. It's really nice.
Yeah, I mean, he saved the world a bunch of times, and then he saved the universe, so why not give him the happy ending?
Deserves a little bit of rest.
It creates weird splintered timelines. And
don't even try and think about it. The timelines make no sense in this movie. Don't hurt your head.
And still makes it back, and then how he...
I'm sure we're done with
back to that original timeline. It's all sorts of weird.
Your head's going to explode.
It doesn't make...
It makes no sense.
I like the fact that they address the time travel thing head on because they like basically say it's completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And, like,
it's so comic booky. Like it's very comic booky.
And you basically have to go with like rules previously established just because they've all been thought of already. And so they make a joke out of it, and it doesn't. I don't know how he got back or whatever, but it like you said, it was a nice ending for him. If anybody deserves the happy ending, it's the one character that like didn't get soured by the world and changed all that much. He just was true to himself and that true pure hero essentially the entire time.
Yeah, he stood by his beliefs. The only time it was really rocked was he came from an era where he should, trust and listen to the government. Well, I guess there's no era really like that, but he came from a time where he believed his government knew best. And now, and so that was really the crazy thing about Winter Soldier, is it challenged that in Cap. And there's this great moment where, of course, there's the fan service of him saying Hail Hydra in that elevator instead of fighting those guys, which I thought was just fucking hilarious and brilliant. And it shows that he has evolved in some ways, right? Because he figured out a way out of that situation without actually having to fight those guys.
Yeah, I did want to see him fight Frank Grillo again, though. Just, just for the fun of it.
Oh, yeah. And then I think that about covers it for him in this. I think,
Yeah, I think
Oh,
so.
I would like to see a movie. I don't think they'll ever do it because the contract is up. But if you want to do a movie showing like him putting the stones back, and I'd love to see, he took the hammer with him. So if that hammer lets him fly like it let Thor fly, that'd be really interesting for me to see. So I don't think they'll ever do that movie. It'll be too hard to make.
What
but
if
it'd
he
be an
just,
interesting idea. He's got to see Red Skull again.
Yeah, I was about to say, what if he just went back, took Mjolnir with him to that timeline with Peggy, used the hammer to just murder all of his enemies, and then put the hammer back in Asgard, and then came back and was like, all right, Peggy, we can relax now. All the bad guys are gone.
That would be awesome. All right. And then Rhodey. Rhodey's one of the original Avengers, and he's in this. He's there, and he's got some funny lines. He calls Star-Lord an idiot, and Nebula agrees. But, yeah, nobody really cared about Rhodey from the beginning, even when he was replaced. And nobody cares about him now. No resolution, no nothing.
Yeah,
he's the same way he started the movie.
Yeah, he's an emotional tool for Tony.
Yeah, he's a tool. You heard it right here, guys.
Not that he's a tool.
Moving on.
His character is a tool.
Yeah, his character's a tool. No, I got you.
Okay.
All right, so moving on. So someone who's not part of the original set of the Avengers, who actually had a pretty big role in this that I was frankly surprised by, was Nebula.
Yeah, Nebula played a much bigger role than I expected. That was the part that, like, I did not expect. You know, there was all the theories about what was going to happen in the movie, how it was going to involve time travel and stuff. So you kind of expected something along the lines of go back in time and find a way to get the stones and all that stuff. The Nebula, the whole Nebula, like, monkey wrench they threw in there, I did not see coming.
Oh, yeah.
And essentially, it's just because of, like, you know, bad network security. Like,
yeah.
I work with
shitty Wi-Fi or something.
Yeah, I work with some people that can solve that issue. But, like, Nebula played a huge role, and I'm happy for she's an interesting character, and I love the actress as well.
Yeah.
She plays one of my favorite characters on Doctor Who, Amelia Pond, and so.
Oh yeah, I've heard she's on that. I haven't seen her, but I did see her in Jumanji last year, and she was fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm just a big fan of Karen Gillan, and yeah, she's great. But the characters in this movie is a very crucial point in the plot.
Yeah, and it's very, like, nail on the head because she has to shoot her past self.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like letting go of, like, who she used to be and kind of, like, evolving like we, do throughout our lives.
Yeah, she's been one of the most conflicted characters, like, just from the start to where we are now in her arc. Like, she's never fully committed to being the better character, the better, more righteous and moral version of herself until that moment when she literally killed her past self.
Yeah, and then
it's super on the nose.
And then the other big one, like they just started off really focusing on her a lot because you just see her and Tony on the ship.
Yep.
And it's really cool because you see her like healing them up, them working together to try and stay the ship.
Playing paper football.
Yeah, playing. Oh, the paper football is amazing because that's like the first time she probably ever just played a casual game with someone.
Yeah, exactly.
Like ever.
You saw how confused she was when he shook her hand after she beat him at something.
Yeah.
Like she got really frustrated when she didn't do it right and wanted to try again immediately. And then like she won. Tony's like, "All right, you won. Fair game." She's like, "I won, but you're just okay."
Yeah, and I thought the moment where like they're running low on their supplies and she gives him the last of like her rations.
Yeah,
like food, he gives her some food. He gives her the food, and she just passes it back.
Also, she's an android. Can she really die like that?
Well, my guess is she's part android, since she was even consuming food. Either that, or she's a total bitch wasting resources for Tony. Then
just because she enjoys the food.
Yeah,
I don't really need this, but cashews are delicious.
Sorry.
My bad, bro.
All right, moving on to Thor, which I thought was absolutely awesome. Thor started out in this series as one of my least favorite characters. Pat and I often can't decide what sucks more, the first Thor or Thor the Dark World. I think the first Thor sucks more. I think you think Thor the Dark World sucks a little bit more. But we both agree that they're both pretty sucky, right?
Yeah, I haven't watched the Dark World in a long time, and I want it to be good because, again, another Doctor Who character, Christopher Eccleston, who played the big bad elf, just apparently hated that movie.
Yeah,
like, it was a blatant cash grab for him, and like he like super regrets it. But
Yeah, I
It was
think
an
he
awful
said
movie.
he was told he was only going to be in the movie so much, and then he was in it even more than they suggested originally, and he
Yeah.
had to go through hours of makeup, as a lot of actors who do comic book movies have had to find out. I mean, just talk to anyone who's played Mystique, right?
Yeah.
It's like being... Danny DeVito would fall asleep in the makeup chair for Batman Returns, but that's another story entirely.
But, I mean, Thor had a great arc, though.
Yeah. So anyway, getting bogged down. So, yeah, Thor Ragnarok was just awesome, and people really started being interested in the character again after that. And then it was just fantastic in Infinity War with the axe and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then in this one, it was great because I just thought this was one of the best examples of what trauma can really do to someone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we've all been in those terrible places where we feel like we've failed and we just get self-indulgent and we just get, you know, down on ourselves like he was. Like, I thought that was, like, the most real representation of, like, going through depression and things like that I saw in the whole movie. He was, like, my favorite version of that. Like, Fat Thor got some hate on the internet because it caught people by surprise again, like the Hulk. But I actually really liked the move.
Yeah, and I think it definitely makes sense for his character. You know, he's always been an overly emotional, like, quick to action, quick to immediate gratification character. Like, that was the biggest flaw in him in the first movie and why his father banished him, because he was just too quick to do anything. He didn't really listen to counsel. He just immediately went with his anger and immediately retaliated to everything. So it makes sense that a character who does that would look for the immediate kind of gratification or the immediate release from his depression and his self-hatred due to the fact that he failed by drinking it away and just doing nothing and hanging out with his friends. Like it definitely makes sense for that person
and
to
so
evolve
again,
that way.
Yeah, and so again, like Tony talking to his dad, Thor gets the opportunity to talk to his mother, and that part actually hit me a lot better. I really enjoyed that part even more than the Tony and the dad scene.
Yep.
And when like Thor grabs his hammer right before leaving that time, that was really cool to like see. Like he was very proud of himself and happy that he was, you know, still worthy after spending all these years in toil and misery over, you know, his failure in Infinity War.
Yeah, and I do like the way they handled it as well, because like he didn't go to his mom and his mom didn't go like, get your shit together. His mom was like, oh, you had a really tough time, huh? Like, I'm sure it hurts, but just remember how awesome you are and go be awesome again. And he's like, you know what? I probably can do that. Like, I probably can move past this. And, like, they didn't shame him for being whatever. You know, they were just like, hey, you're a great
and
potential.
And even after that, I really like the part where he wants to wear the Infinity Gauntlet and he almost begs for it. He's like, I just want to do something. I want to feel like I helped. He's really desperate after the experience in the last movie.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense because I think that he took it the hardest because he was like the closest to stopping it, you know? It makes sense for his character arc, right? Like he was too impulsive, too emotional at the beginning of the Thor movies, and that's what got him in trouble with his dad, and he lost the battle because for those same reasons. He was too impulsive, too emotional, just wanted to rub it in Thanos' face before he finished it, and it cost him...
Yep, should have gone for the head.
Yeah, and it cost half the universe, so him wanting vengeance is expected.
Yeah, so it was pretty incredible for me for Thor to go from one of the people I was the least interested in when this series started to becoming one of the most fascinating for me.
Yeah.
And I like the way that they tied off his ending with him leaving with the Guardians, and they already say Chris Hemsworth has signed on to do 2 more movies, which I'm really excited about given like what we've seen so far.
Yeah, and before Thor Ragnarok, I never thought I would be like, yes, they signed on for 2 more movies with Thor.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You didn't give a shit before Ragnarok, but now you're like, okay, that's exciting. Thank God.
Especially to see the way that he interacts with the Guardians. Like, I love the little power struggle between him and Star-Lord at the very end. He's like, well, I'm in charge, right? And he just looks at him. He's like, of course. Of course.
Yeah, exactly. And Tree and Rabbit. So, I mean, it's going to be fun.
Tree and Rabbit. We can settle it with knives, isn't that right? So, anyway, so let's move on to another unexpected big player in this one, which was Rocket. He seemed to be part of the Avengers and was actually working close with them as one of the last Guardians. his motivations were pretty clear. He just wanted to, you know, just like Natasha, he just wanted to get his surrogate family back. He wanted to get the Guardians back.
Yeah, he's another character that came from kind of nothing. He doesn't even know where he came from, and so him having this group of people that he now loves and losing them, and the only one that's left is Nebula, the last one, you know, the one they were fighting for a long time, and so they have this weird relationship, but it just makes sense. It's kind of the typical, just trying to regain what was lost storyline. There's not much, you know, nuance and weird turns to his story. It's just pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But he plays a big, you know, a relatively big role in the sense of he's up there with Tony and
and it's
Hulk
funny to
and
hear how other
smart he is.
characters interact with, you know, with him, right?
Yeah, like particularly him and Tony is funny. The Build-A-Bear comment, and then him telling Tony that Tony's only a genius on Earth.
Right.
You know, when they haven't met that many people from space, and two of them are almost as genius as Tony is in Rocket and Nebula. So, you know, maybe cool your britches a bit.
Yeah, and the way Rocket pets, what is
Paul
Rudd's head,
yeah.
calls him a puppy and stuff like that, treats him like an idiot, and that was great. You know, it's great to watch those moments.
It's funny to see the character that everybody treats like a pet because he looks like a pet treat one of the humans like a pet. It's just funny.
Yeah, and when Black Widow makes that comment, like, I get emails from a raccoon now, so nothing surprises me.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, of course, Hawkeye, who became his alternate persona, Ronin. They didn't bother calling him Ronin, which some people were a little bugged by, but he is only in the movie so much, and there's already Ronin from Guardians of the Galaxy, and people are pretty dumb, so it's a good idea to not throw out, like, the same name for, like, a bunch of different characters, because then you're just going to confuse people anyway.
Yeah, and it's not really necessary for the storyline of the film. Like, you don't need to see him being Ronin the Assassin and all this stuff. It's just that character, they use it as a nod to the comics and a device to show you the path that he went down.
Yeah.
As far as dealing with his loss.
Yeah, because there's that incredible opening with him when he loses his entire family.
Yes, which is I felt was a super effective way to start the film. You know, you end all these other films with everybody going to dust and everybody dying, and one of the big questions was, where was Hawkeye? So they start the film with, he's on house arrest, but he's hanging out with his family, so it's all cool, he's happy, and then poof, they're all gone. And then, you know, the next time we see his character, he is slaughtering a bunch of people. And so it's an interesting way to see how he took it versus how, you know, Iron Man took it and Cap took it and Thor took it, and everybody handled it their own way, but Hawkeye just went completely dark. So he was kind of like...
It seemed like one of those things, like when a large tragedy occurs and you lose someone you care about, one of the feelings that often comes about is like, there's so many terrible people in the world that got to live versus this person that I care about who, you know, didn't. And I think that was also some of Hawkeye's thing, is like, he felt like, you know, he was killing people that deserved to, you know, die in his eyes.
Yeah, Thanos took out half of the world indiscriminately, but he feels like it should have been some sort of justice in taking out the bad half of the world instead of the good half of the world and the pure half of the world, like his family. So, like I said, I think it was a necessary part of a necessary storyline to the arc of the film, because like you have this character that's completely angry and hopeless, and then you have the redemption storyline. You know, he's completely lost in how upset he is, and then a little bit of hope comes around, and he's like, all right, I got nothing to lose, what the hell? And then he tries it, and it works, and then all of a sudden he's like, oh my god, I need to do everything to get back to it, and ends up having to lose one of the people he loves the most to get back to the people that he loves the most.
Yep, powerful sacrifice moment. And he would have sacrificed himself, you know, because him and Black Widow have a relationship going far back. You know, as they bring that up in the original Avengers.
Yeah, and so he's an interesting storyline to go through, and you know, it's just one more emotional roller coaster to throw in there.
Absolutely. And then finally Ant-Man, which was a very unexpected surprise in this movie. I didn't think he was going to be nearly as involved as he was. Mm-hmm. And he ended up being a very key player. That and Paul Rudd always brings a lot of comedy to these roles. If you like going to these Marvel movies, especially for the humor, it's always a good sign to see him. And he sort of acted as the audience in this because he missed all those years, And so through him, we get to find out about things like Professor Hulk, because he's just as confused to see him as the audience is. So it's almost like he's seeing the movie through the same eyes as we are.
Yeah, he's the only one who experiences the movie on the same timeline as the audience. You know, like everybody else has 5 years of story and development that we don't get to see. You know, Tony has a kid and everybody gets depressed and all this stuff. And a lot of people die and then they come back and all of a sudden it's been no time for them. But basically the audience experiences the exact same amount of time as Scott does. And he's the only character that happens for in the movie. Because, you know, the people who were dead miss the whole beginning of the movie and the other people have this whole 5 years you didn't see. So Paul Rudd, the only part of his story that we miss is him floating around in the quantum realm, just not knowing where he is.
Yep.
Probably going, how long has it been? And so he comes back with the audience, and we're right along for that ride.
It's just a twist of fate that he's able to get out of the quantum realm.
Yeah, and he's kind of always been that character that asks the question, you know, what does all this science crap mean? It's going right over my head, like you said to me, and it's... He is the most relatable character in the film, and I think it's cool that he was the one who came up with the idea for it and is starting to understand the concepts and the science behind what he
it reminded
does.
me of when, what was the name of the wife that was in there? Janet, I think?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Janet Van Dyne,
and she had become like a lot smarter and had changed quite a bit when she came out of there visibly. So I think the same thing kind of happened to Paul Rudd. I think he became like, he understood the quantum realm more just because he was in it for so long.
Yeah, he spent
not
some
because
time
he got to explore anything or anything while he was in there, just because the quantum realm can change you so much.
And I think it's cool that he's becoming part of like the, you know, the brain trust or whatever. You know, he's becoming one of the characters that understands stuff that other characters wouldn't think of, and he's the one who came up with the idea on how to fix everything. So I think that if he's moving forward, you know, it becomes a bigger part in a bigger role in the franchise, and more of a leading character and more of a leader in the group, and you know, one of the scientific minds. That would be cool, because he does end up that way in the comics. You know, he's not.
Yeah.
He doesn't stay a confused guy the whole time. You know, he becomes.
But in the comic books, wasn't he also Hank Pym, at least first? And
the
Hank
character
Pym's
of
always been a
Ant-Man was
genius,
Hank Pym, but eventually Scott Lang does take over, yeah. And I think they're relatively true, but I think Scott Lang eventually also becomes, you know, a scientific mind.
Oh, nice. Well, I don't know too much about Ant-Man comics, so that sounds all right.
Me neither.
So let's move on to the story. Part 1, everything that's, you know, essentially right after the last movie, right after the snap. They go to see Thanos, and they try and take him down, and
they succeed.
Right, but it's too late. He's destroyed all the stones, and everyone's already miserable and has already given up. And there's this 5-year period where you're just seeing like everyone trying their best to recover. And a lot of people, you know, well, not a lot of people, but some people think that the first act of the movie is kind of slow. But I think it does a great job of building up where these characters are and what's happened in these 5 years to them, and their emotional reactions to this terrible tragedy. And so then finally we can spend the rest of the movie going on our crazy adventure or whatever, you know, but we need at least this half hour, 45 minutes, or maybe even it's an hour of setup. I don't know if it's that much, but...
I think it is, but it's necessary, you know, it's...
Especially to cap up all these stories that have been going on for over a decade now.
Exactly. There's a lot of moving parts happening to set up the real toll of what Thanos did and how that really affected the world that they live in, and particularly the effect that it had on the characters. You know, you're not going to care all that much about the rest of the movie if the characters don't seem sad. If it cuts back to that world and everybody's just still in the war room just planning, like, all right, we tried all this other stuff, let's just keep going, and they're all hopeful and like determined, like it's not a good story.
Yeah,
you know?
You need to see the characters at that low point before things start to turn around.
Exactly. They lost. They have to take it hard, and they have to show, to start off this film, and how they claw their way back to trying to set things right. They have to show them at that low point. They have to have that emotional toll to set the audience up to have that same emotional feeling to start the film. It's not...
Yeah.
The payoff doesn't matter if you don't start. in a hopeless place.
And there were some predictions ahead of time that Thanos actually wouldn't be as present as people thought. And we were right. I mean, while he does appear at the end for the final fight and the final showdown, he's killed in the first 5 minutes of the movie, which I don't think... Some people were speculating that that was going to happen, but a lot of people, I think, were still caught very much by surprise by that. That he was killed in the first, 5 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, I had heard the rumors, and I was surprised by it as well. But once they started going back in time, I figured he was going to pop back up somehow. It's just a question of how and where, right? And like I said, the Nebula twist caught me off guard, and using that character to pull Thanos back into the storyline and into that new timeline is an interesting twist.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so the beginning part is just all of them, being in this bad place, and then them finally figuring out that there's a possibility with this time travel thing. Tony is even apprehensive at first, thinking that it's impossible, and even once he finds out it is possible, he's not sure if it's worth, doing, or if it's going to work out or whatever.
Yeah, and it makes sense, because Tony has a family now. He finally just put it all away and settled down with Pepper, which is what she'd been trying to get him to do the whole time, what he had always indicated he wanted to do, but always got pulled away, whether it be by his own devices or other things. But yeah, it makes sense for him to be conflicted and not want to try to save the world, because it's a big risk to his
it's become a big risk for him. Yeah,
exactly. Whereas nobody else moved on, Tony's the one who did move on.
Yeah. And the closest I saw to moving on was him and Hulk, but I don't know if you'd even really call Professor Hulk moving on. I don't know, it might still be the beginning of more conflict to come within the character.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about the middle half, part 2, as I would call it. I guess the second hour that we go through.
Yeah, right.
Is all about the time travel and a lot of the fan service for people who've been paying attention for the last few movies. Mm-hmm. You got that awesome Hail Hydra moment from Captain America.
Yep.
You've got Loki somehow escaping with the Space Stone because they screw up part of the heist.
Yeah.
You got Ant-Man putting Iron Man into cardiac arrest during the time of the first movie, and you got Thor saving him with tapping him with the hammer, and even having that line of I wasn't sure that was gonna work. I just kind of threw it out there. And you got seeing oh man, what's her name? The Sorceress Supreme. So there's just all this
Tilda
cool
Swinton?
stuff. Yeah. So there's all this cool stuff that you get to see through the time travel stuff.
Yeah.
Tony meeting his dad, Thor seeing his mom again for the first time in forever.
I did think it was interesting that when Hulk met the Sorceress Supreme, when she did the astral projection, it was just Mark Ruffalo. I thought that was a fun touch.
Yeah, well, and I thought it was funny. It doesn't make much sense, but it is funny when you cut to Mark Ruffalo still talking to the Sorceress Supreme, and you see that Hulk now has a little hat on his head as he's passed out in the corner. It's
I didn't see that.
Oh yeah. He's got
that.
One of those big farmer hats that they wear that made out of straw.
Well, he also fell when.
Oh yeah, maybe
she
a
pushed
hat
him out,
fell
so I'm
on
thinking
him,
maybe
he fell in a pile of stuff and a hat
I'm thinking
fell
maybe
on.
in the course of the discussion, she, as a joke, kind of sat him back up, because he's sitting up on a wall, but she wasn't when she hit him or whatever. But
yeah,
I don't know. Anyway.
So yeah, a lot of cool fan service, a lot of time travel and stuff like that. So that was pretty much
figuring it all out, and illustrating the plan and making sure that everything is on track to go, and the whole figuring out the time travel thing where they had the baby and the old man Scott and then the kid Scott, and they screwed up a bunch of times, and then Tony pops back up. He's like, "Well, I told you, you ended up moving time instead of moving the guy, you idiots." I wish
and Hulk's
somebody
pretty funny
because
he's tell you hopefully nothing happens to Tiny over here. And Black Widow's like, he's joking. He's like, yeah, just a bad joke. So that was pretty funny stuff.
Yeah, it's a good moment throwing a lot of jokes when everybody's starting to get a little bit of hope back.
Yeah.
They're starting to be hopeful. They're starting to think they might have an idea. Yeah, it's looking uplifting. They make it some lighthearted jokes.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Big Lebowski, so to hear Tony Stark just call Thor that, that was pretty good for me.
Yeah, it is kind of funny that they made all of the real world references, because it kind of implies it's similar to the real Earth, so...
Yeah. And then I guess part 3 would have been the final fight, and then the Tony funeral and the wrapping up stuff at the end.
Yeah, I think part 3 really starts when they all jump back in time.
Yeah, when they come back to the present.
No, I think part 3 really starts when they all first go back to the old movies, you know?
Oh, really? See, I thought that was more like the second half when they first
I
started.
guess that would be the climax, yeah. So like the end of the second.
Because you got to think they dedicated at least a half hour to the fight by itself,
That's
the final
true.
fight, and then not to mention however much amount of time is spent on the funeral and Cap going back in time and giving the shield and all that stuff.
And I guess the fight is kind of the resolution of the climax of them gathering all the stones together and doing that snap, right? Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I thought the fight was really spectacular. How would you compare it to the Infinity War final fight? Would you say, like, they're both as good? Would you say this one was a little bit better? Or?
I don't know. They're kind of different in their scope. They, like, Infinity War didn't quite have as big of an army versus army thing. There weren't as many characters involved, so I think this one was much cooler in the sense of, like, you got to see an army of Reavers, an army of Wakandans, an army of sorcerers, you know, anything you can name.
The Asgardians.
The Asgardians. Valkyrie came back on her Pegasus, like,
which was
anything,
awesome.
Every like reference and every culture and every group of people they put together throughout the entirety of the universe.
Spider-Man's kill mode finally
came
pop
back
up on his thing.
Exactly,
Yeah.
like it all came together in one. It was definitely cooler than Infinity War, but Infinity
and seeing
War.
Thor handle the axe and the hammer at the same time in some of that fight, that was pretty sick.
They did in this movie what you're like sitting here wondering why they didn't do in Infinity War. In Infinity War, you're like, they had a lot more resources than they pulled together for this final battle. I don't know why they're not calling all these people. And in this movie, they did. You know, in this movie, they're like, okay, we got to call in the reinforcements. And so, you know, everybody bands together. They win. There's like you said, there's super cool moments. There's Cap getting the hammer. There's Thor fighting with both hammers. There's all the women landing and protecting the Infinity Stone. Which
is pretty cool, because a lot of those women didn't get their fair share during the series, didn't get as much time in the limelight. So that was like a cool little thing to do for all of them at that part.
Yep, and I know one of your favorite moments was Ant-Man. Like, right at the beginning, Ant-Man punches the giant monster in the face. Like, almost every character has, like, really cool moments.
Like a really epic moment.
That service their character well.
I had heard a lot of people saying they expected Hulk would be more in the fight.
Yeah,
but Hulk's fought so much in like these other movies, so it makes sense that he was pushed a little off to the side, especially because he seemed a little weaker now anyway because of being combined with Bruce Banner. Like, he was, you know, stronger mentally, but it looked like the strength wasn't exactly the same match.
Yeah, I think maybe they're focusing more on the character of the Hulk and the Mark Ruffalo dynamic than they are the fighting force that the Hulk has been. The Hulk was kind of always used in every movie as like the leverage point which they took back the power, you know? Like anytime like, oh no, everything's going terribly. Don't worry, the Hulk comes in. Like, you know, he catches the wolf from eating all the Asgardians.
Oh, yeah, that part was so sick.
He's the one who takes out the big first beast in Avengers. You know, he's always, like, levels the playing field.
Yeah.
He's the one who finally takes out Loki. He just... So in this movie, they didn't have to rely on him.
Yeah, because he had already gotten his due. He was weaker this time, and his arm was screwed up anyway. So there wasn't anything he was going to do spectacular during that big fight that we hadn't already seen him do.
Except for remind everybody, we gotta get him back to where they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
That's the one thing he did. You see him punch somebody, he's like, get him in the time machine. And you're like, oh yeah, we gotta do that.
And then you see the part where Spider-Man pulls that big guy back and Ant-Man steps on him.
Yeah.
That part was pretty sweet. So just a lot of crowd-pleasing moments like that in the final fight. And then you got the funeral afterwards, you know, kind of sad, kind of unfair that Tony has to die.
But at least he gets to give his own eulogy, essentially.
Yeah. Only Tony Stark would want to give his own eulogy. And then you got that great moment where he gets the Infinity Stones from Thanos. And Thanos says, I'm inevitable, and it doesn't work. And then Tony says, I am Iron Man. Yeah. Totally perfectly closing everything off. And it's so interesting because you and I had talked prior about this. about how it was a last-minute decision, and it was the last thing that they filmed for the movie, and Robert Downey Jr. had to grow his beard back out, and he had to get back in a certain shape. Like, that's how last-minute this decision was, to put that back in the movie. But I think it's good versus him not saying anything. And it definitely gives you that full circle feel, because that's how the original Iron Man ended, was with him looking at the camera and saying, "I am Iron Man."
Yeah,
which at the time was really unexpected, a hero to give up his identity like that.
Yeah, there were quite a few callbacks that were, a decade old.
Yeah, like Tony Stark has a heart.
I am Iron Man, I can do this all day from Cap.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tony Stark has a heart.
The cheeseburgers.
Yep. Yeah, there's a bunch of kind of tongue-in-cheek touching moments there.
So, very sweet, like, little ending, and then Captain America getting his happy ending and returning all the stones back. So
Sam Wilson's the new Cap. That's cool.
Yeah, I was expecting it to be Winter Soldier.
Well, they kind of teased that in Civil War by having Winter Soldier use the shield.
Yeah, and both Falcon and Winter Soldier have held the mantle. It just makes more sense to me because Winter Soldier has a skill set that is very similar to Captain America's. So for that reason alone, it just would have made a little bit more sense to me, I think.
I did see something talking about, like, somebody asked Chris Evans about it. He said that he thinks that Sam and Cap have a closer relationship than he and Bucky because they were kind of similar in that Cap was this weak guy that not really overcame any odds. He got a science experiment, and now he's able to keep up with everybody else and surpass everybody else. Sam is a regular human who's able to stand next to superheroes and gods, and also the fact that they became friends, like, as adults, whereas, like, Bucky and Cap were kind of childhood friends that only stuck together because of that history. And also the biggest factor, I think, is Bucky is still, there's not been much resolution to his character.
Yeah.
He still is a kind of fragmented mind, vulnerable character whose mind could get taken over at any moment. They don't want to put...
Well, I think they implied the Wakandans helped fix him, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah, they implied he was there.
Yeah.
It was implied they were watching him, and he was on the sidelines, and they gave him a new arm and stuff, but, like, they never...
tell you for sure.
Yeah, they never resolve the character's conflict that well. So, with Sam being a constant presence at Cap's side for so long, and being just a constant force for good, through so much... I think it makes sense.
Yeah. But, it was anybody's guess. People were definitely speculating because they knew he was going to have to hand the shield off eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, alright, another thing I wanted to talk about was, going into this after Infinity War, you had Captain Marvel and Ant-Man. Those were the only movies that took place between Infinity War and Endgame. I mean, technically, Captain Marvel takes place in the 90s, but you know what I mean. Those are the two movies that they gave us. So it made people wonder, it's like, okay, well, what information or what important stuff's going to happen in these movies that's so essential to Avengers Endgame? And it was like, so who's going to be more essential, Captain Marvel or Ant-Man? Now, Ant-Man, after seeing the movie, there's no question that he was heavily involved in the storyline. Captain Marvel, however, was used much less than I expected her to be. And... while I do like her being in the movie, and I did find her entertaining when she was there, I think, if the actress got sick or something happened, they would have been able to make that movie without her, just with, like, a couple small little rewrites. Because the only thing I can think of is who would save Tony at the beginning. That's the only problem I see, and I bet they could have figured that out with somebody else other than her.
Yeah, and I mean, like, she took out the ship, and, like, so there's big pivotal moments in the battle itself.
Yeah.
But that could have been reworked and...
Yeah, you could have had, like, Scarlet Witch do something crazy that would bring down the ship or something. Maybe she brings down the whole ship with her psychic powers or something.
Yeah, I actually did think that was a pretty cool moment that you saw Scarlet Witch essentially beat Thanos, and his only way to win was to blow up the entire surface of the planet he was on with his ship. Like, she started ripping him apart, and he just pulled the Hail Mary desperate move to get out of it, so that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah,
so versus the Cap Marvel Ant-Man question, what was going to be more essential or more involved? It goes without question after seeing the movie that it's Ant-Man. Yeah. I mean, it's his whole, like, quantum realm stuff that even saves the day to begin with.
Yeah, Captain Marvel has moments that impact the story. Like you said, she's the one who brings Tony back. She fought Thanos and was successful for a moment, but without Ant-Man, they don't have any possibility of going back in time. So Ant-Man was obviously the much bigger
chess piece, the most important piece.
Exactly. The most important piece, essentially, in the whole movie.
Yeah.
Without Ant-Man, none of that movie happens.
So let's talk about the crowd-pleasing moments now.
Yeah.
What for you were like the real mind-blowing, holy shit moments? That's what we're talking about here. For maybe even you, or for you think maybe just the audience probably had a great reaction to.
Well, I think the obvious big ones are Thor with the 2 hammers and Cap using Mjolnir.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones for me personally, like I did like the scene where all the women were on the screen at the one time. It was just a cool moment. And then I really liked Pepper and Tony fighting back to back.
Yeah,
like
that was
fighting
really cool.
together. That was just a cool moment. I was like, yes. Pepper finally just stopped and just accepted.
Yeah.
What it was
and
gonna be.
people had been speculating for a while that she was going to be in armor at some point.
Yeah.
Especially since Iron Man 3, when he put her in like some armor to protect her when his house was getting attacked, I think, at one point.
My question, though, is dude, she has Extremis.
Oh, I think Tony said he worked that out of her or something.
Did he
right?
just solve that?
Yeah.
I thought she was just still like a super-powered lava monster.
Yeah, because there's a line that he has at the end.
He just walk around and just blast people with lava.
Yeah, no, in that movie he says, he's like, I almost had this figured out 15 years ago when I was drunk. I'm sure I can figure it out. And then they just kind of write it off as that. That's like really the last time you hear of it. But that would be funny if she was shooting like flames out of her mouth and shit at the end of this movie. That'd
be awesome. Like somebody rips her armor off and she just like lava faces them or something.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean the big fan pleasing moments. Yeah, like I said, Cap using Mjolnir, Thor with both hammers.
Ant-Man punching that Chintari. I think that's what the giant flying monster is. That was pretty sick, even though Hulk had already done that in the first movie. I thought it was really cool. Because Ant-Man, in my mind, has had almost no badass moments. Because it's all... His movies are mostly all about the humor.
And they're kind of heist movies, right?
Yeah, and so, like, just to have that sweet moment where he just delivered, like, that epic punch as a big man, that was pretty sweet for me.
That was pretty... And he also... Yeah, like you said earlier, he killed Thanos' general by stepping on him after Spider-Man knocked him over.
Yep, and then you got cool. When Cap used Mjolnir, he actually saw the lightning shooting from it and the whole 9 yards.
Yep.
And then he's got that great part where he just catches it right before saying Avengers Assemble. Yep. And it's just like, oh my god, like, what?
That was the moment you all were always waiting for, you know?
Yep.
And like, even like that was obviously a big crowd-pleasing moment of just like...
Oh yeah, when I saw it, I remember the audience going nuts. People were cheering and losing their minds.
Yeah, even just like that line of Cap, it's Sam. You hear me?
On your
and you're
left.
just like as soon as you hear Cap, it's Sam, everybody's just like, it worked, it really did work. And then on your left, another callback, and then
or like when Iron Man hugged Spider-Man.
Oh yeah,
because Spider-Man's like, I don't know what happened. I must have passed out, and he just like hugs him, and he's like, this is nice.
That was like that is a good moment because that was like the final motivator for Iron Man to go. I'm gonna try to figure out time travel real quick because he looked at the picture.
Yep.
It's the last thing he does before he discovers time travel is he looks at a picture of him and Spider-Man, and you can see the guilt. You know, he's like, look, if I hadn't taken this kid under my wing. If I hadn't given this kid that suit, he wouldn't have been on that ship. He would have been here. He might not have been gone. We might have won. You know, there's all those doubts, but
and once the first thing he says too, when he sees Captain America after almost dying at the beginning, he says, "I couldn't save the kid."
Yeah,
that's the first thing he says. You know, you can tell it like really devastated and took a toll on him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Tom Holland really delivered his performance when he disappeared in the previous movie. They say he improvised quite a bit of that, like when he's like, I don't feel so good and stuff like that.
Yeah, he says, I don't want to go. The funny thing is, like, well, first, that's a famous line in Doctor Who as well, and he's an English actor, but he also talks about how he's like, I saw an interview where he's like, talking about how he loves that everybody says it was a really good improv moment, but he's like, is it really, though? All I did was say the same thing 3 times. Like, it wasn't that good of improv.
That's sick improv. That's awesome improv. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but, I mean, that's a touching moment. I don't know. There's a lot of good moments. You know?
Yeah.
It's...
Thor finally meeting up with the Guardians, and we talked about that a little bit, that like
Yeah.
power struggle they're having at the end. I mean, that just had me cracking up when he's just looking at him. He's like, of course, of course.
Scarlet Witch
Of course.
gets her revenge moment. Loki's back. That's a fan-pleasing moment. You know,
Yeah.
Loki doesn't die. Fangirls everywhere rejoice.
They can sleep soundly tonight.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the whole movie was... It was a good story
It was
summary,
just
but it
grand
was...
in scale.
Yeah, exactly. It was like... There was bound to be just so many of those moments of like... thank God.
Yep.
You know? Like... where you took the story, you can't not set it up for a ton of fan moments, and just characters coming back is going to be a fan moment, you know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So
I was kind of wondering what the heck happened to the Vision, but I guess that can always be a discussion for another time. I thought they would have fixed him, given that they were suggesting in Infinity War that he might be able to work without the Mind Stone, but then they don't even say some throwaway dialogue, like, we tried to fix Vision, but we never could, like, you know, nothing, like...
yeah, I mean, they are...
Except Wanda saying something, you know, you took everything from me. You know exactly what she means when she says that.
Yeah, and at the end, when she and Clint are talking about how, I wish we could make sure they know, they knew that it was worth it, and she's like, they both know, and, like,
yeah,
they're sharing loss together, you know, and I don't know. They are doing the Scarlet Witch and Vision TV show, though, so...
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that works. If it's some sort of prequel, or if it is supposed to be a sequel and he comes back by some great way. The same way Phil Coulson came back in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for anyone who tried to watch that show.
Have you seen the preview for the newest season?
No, in fact, I might be an entire season behind.
I've never watched anything about that show, but in the newest season, Agent Coulson's a bad guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, or somebody that looks like Agent Coulson.
Well, like the season before that, Ghost Rider was in it, and they actually did him pretty good service. No Nick Cage bullshit. But anyway, we're not talking about the right stuff right now. I think we're getting a little sidetracked.
Yeah.
So finally, what are your final thoughts on this magnificent movie, and what would you give it as a grade? We're talking the
As a
ABC kind of system. And sometimes if you're not sure, you can say things like B+ or whatever. I don't judge.
I thought it was fun. They threw some curveballs in there that I didn't see coming. They wrapped it up nicely. They had a lot of nice resolutions to character arcs, a lot of nice setups for the future of the franchise and the future of a lot of the characters. I mean, I don't know how much better they could have done. I might as well just give it an A. You know,
Yeah.
What was it missing?
Yeah. I mean, this was the culmination of 11 movies. This is film history we're talking about right here. It was like when people got excited about the very first trilogies, when that was a thing, where you'd have 3 movies that were pretty interconnected, like Star Wars and stuff like that. So I think this is a pretty big deal. I'm going to give it a B or a B+ because I think Infinity War was just a little bit better, and I think that may have had a lot to do with the darker tone. I appreciated that more. I still like that there was humor in it, but it for sure was a darker movie. Like, I brought up Star Wars a second ago because that's one of like the big trilogies from back in the day. I just see Infinity War as like the Empire Strikes Back of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And people thought that, you know, a lot of people still believe that Empire Strikes Back is like that series at its height.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, because Empire Strikes Back ends on a very big down note the same way that Infinity War did.
Yeah.
Except Infinity War is even grander.
Yeah, I think there's always something to be said for like the movie that you can end on such an emotionally like devastating for the characters moment is always going to have a bigger impact than where you have to resolve the story and you want to give it a happy ending as much as you can and sour it with, you know, they soured it with characters dying and stuff, but I think that's just where it falls in the storyline, right? Like Infinity War, you can have that shocking end where it's just like ends and you're just like, what?
Exactly. So there's a lot of things that are still going to be shocking about Endgame, but at the end of the day, you know it's the story where the heroes are supposed to win. It's going to work no matter what's going to happen, no matter how it gets there. It is going to work out. It is going to be the happy ending, even if we lose a couple of our characters.
Yeah, it's more predictable. It has to end that way. We knew it was the end of Phase 4, so we knew it was going to be basically a resolution of almost all the open storylines. And I mean, that's kind of why I don't know if I would say Infinity War is better as a movie as far as like serving its purpose in the storyline.
Mm-hmm.
It just is a more impactful movie because of where it sits in the overall storyline of the franchise.
Yeah, so anyway, that was our thoughts on the movie. I hope you found it really interesting. Hopefully you didn't watch this review if you haven't seen the movie yet, because you definitely need to. What I will say is if you decided to not hop on this Marvel train, don't see it, because you'll be very confused. Sit at home and rent a bunch of the DVDs, and then maybe when Endgame comes out on DVD, you can watch that too. But yeah, if you're like way behind on this stuff, that's the only thing I would say, is if you've never seen a Marvel movie before, and people are just going to tell you that this is amazing and that you should go see it, probably don't listen to them, because to some degree, you'll just be really confused.
Yeah, I think my mom saw 3 Marvel movies ever, and then she saw Infinity War and was like, that was great, let's go see Endgame. I'm like, why?
Well, at least that's better than some people. I've known people that haven't seen any of them and are thinking about seeing it. It's like, maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. I don't know. I saw all the movies, so I know I liked it because I know like what it means to some degree. But I don't know. Maybe now I'm just being pretentious. Anyway. But I hope you enjoyed our review, guys. Go see Avengers Endgame if you haven't seen it. Hopefully we'll see it again before it's even out of theater. Thanks for joining us. Have a nice night.
We lost. All of us. We lost friends. We lost family. We lost a part of ourselves. This is the fight of our lives.
This is gonna work, Steve.
I know it is. Because I don't know what I'm gonna do if it doesn't.